Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show today, Chris.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it should be an interesting conversation.
What does it even mean by running a hybrid model with Amazon? What does it mean theoretically, and what does it mean practically?
Well, technically, it's the art of being able to run an Amazon vendor, or 1P as we call it within the industry, account alongside a seller 1 or 3P. In terms of the overall model, you have the ability to do both. So the real reason why vendors may look at going into a seller is because a lot of the issues we mentioned before in terms of inventory and pricing and that, because the inventory itself may not be viable to vendor. Everything is almost on a line-by-line basis. You have to be able to review what is the best strategy. So everything to do with when we talk about what the hybrid model effectively is it's a balancing act between what works at an ASIN level for you or for your client with every product. And that's the really key takeaway, I think, from understanding what the model consists of and what you need to do.
This ASIN Amazon vendor, that ASIN, Amazon seller, what does that look like in terms of delineation?
There is this huge mistake that so many businesses make, and I'm sure a lot of the vendor agencies will pick up on this. So many where a client will go, I've got that product set up on Amazon vendor. They'll then also send it into Amazon FBA. And if you think about it as an idea, it's not a great one. Just for the fact of someone is going to get an issue there. You're either going to have your vendor purchase orders are going to be impacted because FBA wins the buy box, or vendor will have the buy box with your purchase order and your FBA stock will become stuck in this loop of no buy box. It will then affect what we call your IPI score, which is your sort of credit score against your FBA stocks. So that's a no-win situation. So it's really clear that when you're looking at an ASIN level, you choose one or the other. Now, FBM, as in fulfilling yourself, is slightly different because even though there could be some buy box conflicts, we've been told that effectively, even though vendor would take the buy box, if there is an issue with that ASIN, if it gets pulled from stock, if there's some sort of technical issue within vendor, FBM can still pick up that slack. So running vendor FBM, it's not the best scenario, but it's definitely a better scenario than trying to run vendor and FBA. That is a super conflict. You'll either upset vendor or you'll impact your FBA scores. So you want to make sure that the analysis is at a ASIN by ASIN level.
What have you seen in your business as you've tried to implement hybrid strategies? What have been some of the biggest highlights for you and maybe some of the painful learnings?
Yeah, the whole space is so interesting because it depends purely on the client-by-client basis. So what tends to happen is if a client comes to us with vendor, it depends on their queries first of all. So we have clients that are still purely vendor and that works for them operationally, the purchase orders work, the pricing works. For some it doesn't, and it depends on how that client comes to us. So really what we're doing is when we do this analysis, we will look at the business holistically and again, almost line by line and say, what's working in terms of profitability? Where are you in terms of your overall operational structure in vendor? What's made you go to seller? And we've had some fantastic case studies. I think, in terms of what we've done in terms of doing the hybrid model, some that stay on vendor. I think when we look at our client list, so we've got about 8 or 9 vendors that are on the hybrid model, but only a very small percentage of those, that maybe 1 or 2 that are just within vendor. And that's because we've done the analysis, we've looked at their ranges, we've either made that suggestion to stay or they're operationally only are able to stay on vendor.
Where would you sort of sum up, some of the benefits, the drawbacks, the watch outs? What are the 4 or 5 pieces of advice and considerations you would give to those considering the hybrid model?
So, the key and main benefit behind doing this is the diversification of your portfolio and products. And that really gives you a second bite of the Amazon platform without having to risk not being able to present your product range to all consumers. And it's a win-win for both. If it's not profitable for Amazon to buy the product from you, it's perfectly reasonable for them to not want to invest in a slow-moving range or one that is not meeting their profit demands. But then you're still able to offer that product line to the consumer and still give Amazon its cut. So that's the real crux of it. If you've already got a vendor manager and you're an account manager and you have those comms, work on that relationship. You've got to be clear with your expectations, their expectations. You've got to be clear, negotiate and discuss and work on those, net PPM figures when you've got to build a good rapport and communication, not just on vendor, but on all aspects of Amazon. So I would definitely say that if you have vendor management, do that. But it can be a big drawback if you've been told, you can't move to seller. But the other side of that is you should be able to communicate in that way. It is an important point that if you move an agent away from vendor to seller, at the moment, you will need to be able to still maintain the content and the listing that's still within vendor, especially if things like, your item specifications are changing and you've got, multiple retailers that are working with you or something along those lines. It's all about crunching the numbers. That's the key thing to take away from it. Every single element of that in terms of making sure that you maintain that level of profitability should then define where you pivot towards, and then also consider what are Amazon buying, how are they buying it. There is so many things to consider in terms of the overall process. In terms of, it really is a balance. We talk about benefits and drawbacks, it really is a balance. I think the biggest takeaway I can give to this discussion today is, conversation we've had today, is that flexibility does exist within the platform, and it's not a case of being able to do all or nothing. So I think it's a fair comment that a lot of vendors lack of understanding, might want some to make the quick move to seller without fully reviewing their options. See if there's a vendor manager working within vendor support to create reasonable goals. Vendor's definitely an art form, but it's also true that without proper support available on vendor, it's making a lot of brands explore possibilities in other areas, especially on seller. So, especially when they see their competitors, wiping the floor within their category that might be on FBA and stuff. So it's all about communication. It's all about really having that flexibility and taking that time.
We've got quite a few questions. We're going to try and do some rapid fire answers without noticing, okay, Chris. So let's see. What's the best way for them to
best way to kind of contact me, of course, is through our website, which is christurtonecommerce.com. Fill out a form, or if you go to LinkedIn, please add me on there. I always love reading really deep insights into people's